This is the 19th video of the Forged Fiction series. If you haven't seen the other videos in this series, check out the Forged Fiction playlist on our channel. You can click on the link in the description or click the card in the top right corner of the screen. After James comes another writing in the name of someone who was supposedly one of Jesus' closest companions, Simon Peter. In the traditional view, Peter is seen as the first pope. The papacy itself wasn't established until the late 4th century, but the view originates from the Gospel of Matthew. "And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it." Matthew 16:18. Peter, meaning rock, is seen as the rock the church was built on. This is why the traditional view is one of Peter being the first pope. In modern times, there has been much debate over the authenticity of 1 Peter. Was it really from the Apostle Peter? I think a strong case can be made that it's not. The vast majority of biblical scholars have more recently become convinced this letter is a forgery. The first, and perhaps the most interesting thing, is that whenever Peter refers to Jesus in the letter, he makes no mention to his close personal relationship with him. The importance of something like that should be readily apparent. If the author of 1 Peter was, in fact, Simon Peter, this should have been a no-brainer. Instead, the only relation to Jesus that is noted in the letter comes in at 5:1. "So I exhort the presbyters among you, as a fellow presbyter, and witness to the sufferings of Christ, and one who has a share in the glory to be revealed." Most translations say elder instead of presbyter, but the Greek text is clearly presbyter. This kind of church hierarchy would not have existed in Peter's day. It didn't even exist in Paul's day. This was a later formation in Christianity. The argument for this letter clearly being a forgery is made even stronger when we look at 4:16. "However, if you suffer as a Christian, do not be ashamed, but praise God that you bear that name." The letter asserts Christians were being persecuted simply for being Christians. There is no record of this in the days of Peter. Even Nero, who was known to persecute Christians, did not do it simply because they were Christian. The reason for his persecution of them was because he believed they committed arson. According to Tacitus, this was a false claim. It wasn't until later, in the early 2nd century, that we finally see any persecution simply for being Christian. We know the book was written under Peter's name, but many phrases seem Pauline. As has been noted in New Testament scholarship, if we were not told at the get-go that this was written by Peter, it would never have been attributed to him. Usually, when a writer wants to pass off his work as written by somebody else, the writer would logically use the language of the one he was trying to impersonate. Here are just a few examples of how the text seems Pauline on the surface. Keep in mind that when we dig deeper, the similarities begin to seem strange. Like when you repeat a word so many times it loses all meaning. "God judges all impartially according to their deeds." 1:17. This parallels Paul's writings in Romans 2 and 2 Corinthians 5:1. "God raised Christ from the dead and gave him glory." 1:21. This is paralleled in Philippians 2:6-10. "Do not return evil for evil." 3:9 is found in Romans 12:17 verbatim. This author is someone claiming to be Peter, but trying to sound like Paul. The real question we need to ask is why. More importantly, why would the author just not claim to be Paul? The letter is rich with themes and sub-themes, the most important one being its emphasis on suffering and endurance. The word pascho, suffer, occurs more times in this short epistle than it does in any other book in the New Testament. Throughout this entire letter, the theme is clear. The Christians must persevere. The author chose to portray this in two interesting ways. The explicit one was simply telling them. The implicit one is much more interesting. 1 Peter is a book that contains Peter and Paul standing face to face and agreeing on every point. If Christians are to face a world in which they are persecuted, they need to stand together in unity. To show the deeply rooted harmony of the church in the face of ongoing opposition, an unknown author wrote a book of encouragement, claiming to be Peter, but sounding like Paul. This is a forgery that ostensibly deals with the suffering of the Christians, and that implicitly deals with the necessity that it would bring, the unity of the apostolic band. But that's all for this time. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter, and if you like the content, please consider dropping a like and subscribing. And if you really love us, consider supporting us on Patreon. Make sure to click that bell to get notified when we make a video, and check out our new website. Be sure to share if you learned something, and we'll see you next time.